right, Joe, thank you for coming all the way out here.
Of course, man.
Can you, for the people watching, listening, tell them who is Joe Cicero?
Yeah. So I am the founder of The Yard. We have a couple of locations in the Bay Area, one in Mill Valley, one in San Francisco. We're a bit of a unique fitness concept. So it's all reservation-based facilities. When you make a reservation, you get your own squat rack for the hour and then shared access to the rest of the gym. So the idea is you can be more efficient than ever with your fitness because you know exactly what set of equipment you're getting every time you show up. So I've been doing that for a little over 3 years now. Prior to that, my background is in finance and consulting. And prior to that, I was a football player up through college. So, fitness, especially weightlifting, has been a big part of my life for the better part of 20 years. So yeah, that's me.
Okay. I guess we'll start more so with The Yard. You talked a little about what you did before. Was there any part of what you were doing before The Yard that motivated the start of your business?
Yeah, it's interesting to think back to like what, people ask me like, why'd you start it?
Mm-hmm.
What inspired it? And I can't really point to a singular moment.
Yeah.
I think it was just an idea that had been brewing in my head for a while. I think for the longest time, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur and be in business for myself. And like I said, through football, weightlifting and training had been such a big part of my life that I kind of landed on turning, my passion into my work. But again, no like real necessarily intention or design. It just kind of worked out that way.
Were there other ideas that made the short list before you decided on The Yard?
None that really ever caught on. I think like many people that end up working for themselves, I've always daydreamed about ideas here and there. Okay. But ultimately just kind of landed on this one. And, I don't know how much of that is, this was the right idea and I committed to it, or I committed to it and made it the right idea,
It's gotta be both, right?
I think a little bit of both. Yeah.
Where, so 3 years in right now, what would you say, like, as far as where you currently are with the business? Is it where you expected it to be?
Yeah. I think, San Francisco has kind of exceeded all expectations, candidly. I say we kind of bought at the bottom. So we moved into our space in December of 21. So very much height of COVID times. Yeah. So people wearing masks, I'm checking vaccine cards. So we got a really good rate. And I think we really benefited from the fact that people were losing their minds, cooped up in their apartment and ready to kind of, be around people. And I think we really did benefit from that. I opened Mill Valley about 1.5 years later, and that was more opportunistic. I live in the area, the vacancy came up, and it was just too good of an opportunity to pass up on. We definitely weren't ready. Not that you ever are ready for some of these endeavors, but it was definitely premature. And fast forward 2 years to now, and we've kind of turned a corner, and we're to the point where we can start to think about expansion beyond the two.
Third one, right? Where's that third one going to be?
Thinking the Marina neighborhood in San Francisco. Right. It's kind of smack dab in between the two.
Yeah.
So geographically, it makes a ton of sense, and demographically, it's kind of the perfect neighborhood for us.
Yeah. Do you, if you don't mind me asking, do you own those locations or do you rent the spaces?
I lease both of the locations. Okay.
Yep. That would have been incredible if you had bought during the bottom at COVID.
Yeah.
That would have been great investments.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I think that's
wildly expensive either way. But
the cost of entry is really high. And I think that's an opportunity down the line, to ultimately own the real estate. And if at some point in the future, I ultimately sold the businesses or the business, owning the real estate could be a good kind of retirement vehicle.
Especially like the volatility of, that price will fluctuate a ton, I'm sure, in the city.
Yep.
Mill Valley maybe less, but in the city for sure, it's going to move a lot.
Yep.
So looking forward then to, let's say 1 year from now, do you think the third location will be open?
The goal is by the end of this year.
Okay, amazing.
I'm putting it out into the universe
What
as we
needs to
speak.
change between now and then though to make that happen?
It's just a matter of finding this. Like we're ready to
Okay.
go.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of finding the right space. You know, being a bootstrap business, I have the benefit of being picky.
Hmm.
I don't have any investors that are clamoring for certain decisions, which has its pros and cons. But I think when I look back at our first two locations, I know I would have had regret had I not moved on them.
Hmm.
You know, I haven't felt that way about a third location yet,
Yeah.
where it was like I need to have it regardless of circumstances. So, um, part of me is really trusting my gut that when I see that location, I'll move on it. But there is also something to be said about having a process, having a system,
Yeah.
seeing enough opportunities, and viewing them objectively. A little bit of a balancing act there.
I've asked you this before, but for the viewer's sake, you're 100% owner of the yard, right?
Yes, sir. Yep.
And you self-funded.
Yes, sir.
So that is definitely an advantage, I imagine, in terms of making that decision, like where your third location is going to be and when. Um, do you though, like even though you could do it entirely by yourself, how do you like? Do you have people around you who you ask them, maybe like the trainers there, or I don't know, the wife maybe, to make sure that your choice is right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I need to be better about this. And it's something I'm actively working on, not only in business, but in fitness.
Yeah.
And that's why I hired you, right? Is
Mm.
because, I have some level of knowledge, but, something we've discussed a lot of is, willpower and wherewithal is a limited resource,
Yeah.
and, not tapping into those resources around you for support, for second opinions, is a missed opportunity. So yeah, like I said, pros and cons to not having outside influence, but I think as we expand, that'll become a necessity.
Yeah.
Because with each location, the never-ending list of to-dos becomes longer,
Yep.
and without delegation and without expertise on how to efficiently check those boxes, it's just not possible.
Yeah. And I mean, no discredit to you at all, but I think mathematically, if you are confident in those first two choices for the city and the Mill Valley location were correct, mathematically, it becomes increasingly less likely to be correct
Law of
again.
averages
So
eventually plays
you've
out,
got to
right?
make damn sure, right?
Yeah,
The
yeah,
third one.
yeah.
But yeah, no, I definitely think that for you, maybe leaning on the people around you trust will be helpful. What about, so a year from now, that third location will be open and operating. What about further into the future? Like, where do you want the yard to go?
Yeah, and that's another thing I sometimes, I guess, struggle with is, being rational and pragmatic with having a vision,
Mhm.
and this idea of, we overestimate what we can do in a year, but underestimate what we can do in 5 years. So yeah, I would love to tell you we'd be in every big city across the country. But right now my thought is build out density of owned locations within the Bay.
Yeah.
Really continue to prove and refine our model. And then ultimately expanding beyond the Bay, whether that's franchised or owned locations. I do think there's a real unique opportunity with what we do from a franchising perspective, because we work with so many independent trainers who, better than anyone else, it's a very feast or famine industry.
Mm-hmm.
So the difference between, being super busy with zero time to yourself and being hungry for, a client to put food on the table it's a very thin margin.
Yeah.
And once you're at the top end of that range, growth beyond that point is tough, right? Because there's only so many hours in the day, you can only see so many clients. So I always say, like, the two paths forward from that point is doing something online asynchronously,
Mm-hmm.
which is a lot of what you're doing, or opening your own studio.
Yeah.
And I think when I think of franchising, I think empowering our trainers, which is really core to our mission, and supporting them to open up their own studios that's branded, co-branded, white licensed version of the yard is kind of how I see expansion beyond the owned stores in the Bay.
Yeah, no, I think that's an important point, that The thing to me that was really cool about your business is that, like, sure, great gyms. I've been to one of them.
Yep.
Great gyms, but mostly that it gives an avenue to trainers to make a better living.
Yep.
And more sustainably, I would say, because a lot of the issues you might run into, even in a private gym, as a trainer, if you're training at a private gym, you might run into this problem where like you are there on time with your client, but there's no equipment.
Yeah.
Like everything's taken up, and that would be terrible. Whereas like in your situation, people can book those things ahead of time. So they know for sure they have their space to train their client. But you're almost saying like on the long term, say like, down the line, franchising for you would be perhaps Ross Dempsey.
Yeah.
One of our favorite trainers.
100%. Yeah. He'd be a prime candidate.
Yeah. Maybe they use that as their avenue to scale their business past just training. Right.
Yep. And
That's
I think,
really cool.
I think of someone like Ross, like,
shout out to Ross. Ross is a great guy.
Yeah.
I really love Ross.
Yeah. I was just with Ross yesterday.
Joe loves Ross. Ricky doesn't know Ross, but Ricky loves Ross too.
I think, Ross specifically, I think of the relationship we've built over the last, nearly 3 years, and, business aside, I would say, his business has kind of gone up to the right in a big way. And he's been a really important member of our community, but, I think that's one of the more rewarding, relationships I've had. Again, business aside, just seeing his growth, and having those conversations around empowering him and supporting him to continue that growth.
Yeah.
So, when I think about like my why and what, inspires me, it's those types of relationships, is really supporting and empowering trainers to grow their businesses, in a way that they never could before.
Do you feel like, part of mapping out the longer term future of business, do you feel like it's tough to balance? Like, I know as a business, a lot of times it's tempting as you scale to measure progress as profitability. And I know especially for you, maybe less so, but especially if you had investors or other owners, it is one of the most like objective empirical ways to do it. But if you have this preference, like you really you derive a lot of meaning and purpose from working with some of the trainers like a Ross Dempsey, that doing it that way where it's always you, that may actually limit growth in terms of money, in terms of numbers.
Yep.
That may still be the way to do it though, right?
100%. I think I would, even if that relationship with Ross was an unprofitable one, it's not, but if it were, like, I think that's something, I would do over 10 times out of 10.
Yeah.
It kind of goes back to the beginning of the conversation. We're talking about, why I started with the origins of the gym. I think building those relationships and helping people is where you actually get some satisfaction out of the experience versus the bottom line.
Yeah. So if you had to guess, or not guess, but if you had to say where you'd like to be then 5 years from now, do you have an idea in your head what that looks like?
Yeah, I think building out that density in the Bay, whether that's 5 stores or 10, but having some scaled version of that beyond. So whether that's franchised, licensed, maybe this trainer empowerment is a commercialized thing where, I'm meeting with trainers across the world to just help them build their own businesses because, the business of personal training, we've talked about this a lot, is difficult, not complicated, right? Yeah. It's a lot of simple blocking and tackling and discipline, not all too different from the training itself.
Absolutely.
So, when I'm having these conversations, it's the same things over and over again. So I think being a voice of authority and being somewhat prescriptive and definitive in answering those questions, I think is really valuable to people, because when you're in business for yourself, you have, again, an endless endless list of things to do. Yeah. And not knowing where to start or how to approach them is a real challenge. So I think being that voice of support really is valuable for folks.
If I'm allowed to make a suggestion for you,
please,
in the long term, I would really love to see you hire, very specifically, almost consider it like if you've played volleyball, like a libero or red shirt, because right now that's you.
Yep.
And as you scale, say third location opens, I imagine that's going to be overwhelming. Like for the people watching, listening, Joe does this thing where like anytime somebody can't make it into work or can't teach a class, or whatever, it just ends up being you.
Yeah.
Which is admirable. And it's great that you have the knowledge and the capability to do that. But I do think that even as it is, that's one of your biggest challenges in like the way that you manage yourself and your time.
Yep.
And it'll only get worse or harder as you scale up and have more locations.
100%.
I wonder if part of that though is like, certainly that would be a valuable hire, but finding the person who is going to hold the standard as high as you know you will.
Yep.
That's tricky, right?
Yep, it is. Yeah. And so yeah, I think creating that shared feeling of ownership and accountability, and letting go, from my standpoint, letting go a little bit is something that I really struggle with. And something I need to work on and I'm actively doing.
It's a tough thing though. I think this, like I struggle with that too. A lot of the business owners that I coach and that I work with, kind of the same deal. It's a hard thing to get to that point where you recognize that the most valuable work that you do, it's not valuable because of like the time investment or the difficulty. It's valuable because of the significance.
Yep.
So a lot of times it's just making a choice.
Yep.
So that other people don't have to.
100%. Yep.
But then trusting that they're going to take that choice and run with it properly.
Right.
Right.
Right. Yeah. The trust is the big word there. Right.
You have to be willing to be wrong.
Right.
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 But yeah, that's a hard thing, I think, for all of us, but one that you'll have plenty of practice with near future, I'm sure. What would you say with the business? What are your biggest struggles on the day-to-day basis, like just operationally?
I think it's kind of what we just went through, is that trust and letting go.
Yeah.
I think I have visibility, like literal visibility into every corner of the business, like, from the data to what's happening in real time. I could pull up a camera, the surveillance footage right now if I wanted.
You can see a raccoon breaking into your,
yeah. And yeah, I think it is a challenge for me to remove myself from those things.
Mm-hmm.
And even if I'm seeing them or aware of them, like not reacting, with a knee-jerk reaction, but letting them play out, let the folks who are responsible for handle them and trusting them to do it right.
Right.
And if they don't, like, that's an opportunity for a learning moment and a discussion. But a lot of times I find myself not even allowing that. I'm jumping in before that opportunity even presents itself. So
I remember we talked about that recently. Like you almost have to, if you're going to delegate, if you're going to trust people to run your business or help you run the business, you have to be okay. And maybe I think the question I asked you is like, what would happen if you didn't step in?
Right.
Like, what's the worst case?
Yeah. And yeah, we have some worst case scenarios that we won't go into on the air now, but
off record.
But yeah, no, 9.999 times out of 10, things work out totally fine. And again, I think Nelson Mandela said, I never lose, I either win or I learn. Like that's kind of the mindset you have to have.
Joe was prepared for a podcast. He broke out a Nelson Mandela quote. That's crazy.
I'm not a big quote guy, but that's one.
No, I love that.
That's one I've hung my hat on over the years. Because you don't really have a choice, right? It's like, what is the alternative? So yeah, I think that whole notion of letting go and trusting the team, which, everyone that's involved with the gym, employees, trainers, we have a super solid team, like, that is fully capable. I think if anything, in some ways I'm inhibiting them. So, So yeah, that's something I'm actively working on, and have room for growth like everything else. But that's definitely very much top of mind for me.
Do you have any regrets as far as, I guess, in the context of your journey as an entrepreneur, as a business person?
I don't think so. Hindsight's 2020.
Sure.
I'm sure there's some situations I could have handled better. I think if I regretted anything, it would be having emotional reactions to things, taking things personally, like not allowing things to play out, because ultimately those outcomes have, again, 9.9 times out of 10 have worked out just fine. So, was it worth all the anguish and the stress and the anxiety leading up to it? Again, most times not.
Yeah.
So I think giving myself a little bit of a break and letting that stuff play out is kind of the key theme here.
So if there were regret, maybe a way to articulate that is allowing yourself to feel the ways that you have about whatever issues popped up. Like the issues were probably going to exist either way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. Allow myself to feel those feelings. Don't assign judgment to them. Don't assign judgments to outcomes because I'll throw another quote at you, not Nelson Mandela, but my offensive coordinator in college. Whenever we'd play on Saturdays, and Sundays we'd review film, and he said, the film is never as good or as bad as you anticipate. So if we got destroyed on a Saturday, you're showing up Sunday like, low spirits, dreading getting called out on film for screwing things up. And the opposite's also true. You win big, you go on Sunday, you're expecting, everything to look perfect and to get a pat on the back. But the reality kind of falls in between, and I think trying to have that same mindset with business outcomes, right? Like, the failures are never as bad as you ever really anticipated them to be, and the successes are never as great. So kind of having that mindset where, the outcomes are what they are, and there's always opportunities to learn from them and refine and iterate on them.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times, similar principle anyway. Sometimes when I coach guys for bodybuilding, as they get really lean, you become hypercritical of your physique, and they'll say things, I feel like, really, really flat today, like super small. And then they'll have let's say they go through like a refeed day, and they'll, message me in the morning, like, Coach, I feel amazing. I'm gigantic. I'm huge today. And like the updates on film, they look the same.
Yeah.
So it's like, however you feel, you're always wrong.
Right.
But I do think that it's useful, and like really in business, especially, maybe more so than bodybuilding, it's useful to determine is that feeling useful? Because if it's you feeling amazing about some sort of win, I think you should allow yourself to feel that.
100%. Yeah.
But if it's you just shitting on yourself because you did poorly or you think you did poorly, that can be useful. Like if you're going to use that to motivate change, maybe appropriate at times. But a lot of times I think people do that as almost like catharsis. It's like they're punishing themselves for doing the thing that was bad or for performing poorly. But if nothing's going to, if you know that you know yourself better than anybody else, if you know you're not going to do anything with that, what was the point of making yourself feel so bad?
Right.
So again, there may be times when it's appropriate, but I think a lot of times, especially people like you or like me, perhaps the people listening, there are many times where you making yourself feel bad, it does nothing other than make you feel bad.
Right. 100%. Yep.
What do you think, comparing your time in business so far to your time working your previous day job, what do you think are the things about you that ultimately determined your success to this point in business? Like what characteristics, maybe ask us differently, what characteristics made it hard for you to want to do your day job continuously versus, I'm assuming some of those same characteristics maybe were a good fit for business?
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because I think for the longest time leading up to, doing my own thing, I really anchored on this idea that one day I'm going to be an entrepreneur, one day I'm going to be business for myself, and that's going to solve everything. Basically scapegoating my work leading up to that point for
what did you imagine it was going to be like?
Liberating, freedom, and I don't know if this is your experience, but I don't necessarily feel liberated. Like in some ways I feel more, I feel that I have more responsibility, and I feel more limited by that in some ways. So I think, that was an interesting wake up call. I think, as soon as I think that I realized that probably a couple days in, this business isn't going,
This sucks.
Well, it's just I think, you spend any time on social media, it's like everything seems like an overnight success.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And I think, I actually remember our announcement video, spent a ton of time shooting content and piecing together this announcement. And I was expecting to like take over the city. I was expecting this viral reaction, and the reaction, it kind of goes back to like, things not being as good or as bad as you anticipate. The reaction was strong. We got good engagement, but it certainly didn't go viral, and it was and still is a grind from that point on.
You needed a Ricky on your team back then.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that kind of expectation was that was an interesting wake up call. But in terms of skills and like what translated from my professional background to now, I think attention to detail, like being really data driven, making decisions based on data, and closely monitoring it, like almost obsessively, to the point where you can anticipate things and act on them decisively.
Perhaps less emotionally too.
Yeah, I think so. But yeah, I think the hardest part for me has been removing that emotion from it, especially actually as we've gotten bigger and with more success, that responsibility has gotten greater. And I think our downside implications are sometimes larger, where it's like any sort of major change impacts, at this point, hundreds of people.
Yeah.
So making, it's this balancing act of being really decisive versus making wholesale changes that breaks everything. And I think that's my biggest fear, is like looking back one day and this being the high point and pointing to a single decision that sent everything crashing down. So it's a constant balancing act.
The thing that's tough, and like me and Ricky have talked about this recently too, like you can't know. And that's like, it's both difficult and like maybe drives me crazy sometimes. But you can't know. And because you can't know, you also can't assign that sort of responsibility to yourself. So if you did make the wrong choice, but you believed at the time that was the best you could do, and you end up being wrong, it sucks, but so be it, right? Like I've certainly done that in business, recently even.
Yeah.
So like I get what you're saying. I understand the way you would feel if that ended up being the case, but two things. One, I doubt that you would make a choice so poor that it would, really end up being like this was the peak of the yard. And like I think it's much more common that it's like a continuum. Like you make multiple choices in the wrong direction that get you there.
Yep.
It's not usually one big thing.
Yep. And that's where, and you probably see this with clients from time to time, where it's one negative action leads to another and it compounds and it spirals downward. So I think that's where having that self-awareness and, in the case of business, access to data, where you can act more objectively, is really helpful.
Do you find the way you managed yourself before working your previous job versus running the business, do you find either one particularly harder or easier? Or different at all, I guess?
Yeah, I think it was easier to manage my time before. I mean, I was expected to show up, at the same place 5 times a week at the same time,
Well, what happened if you didn't?
I mean, theoretically I would be fired.
Yeah.
So I think structure, having that sort of structure, it was, at least in my mind, a little easier to plan around. But I also tell myself that now, like, there's nothing stopping me from creating that same type of structure with my current life, but it's basically a matter of, who's holding who accountable. Right. And I think, now, largely, it's on me, I'm holding myself accountable. So I think that's kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, bringing on experts, bringing on advisors. So, just having a strong support staff, not only to encourage you, but also to hold you accountable, to having that kind of structure is important.
If I might throw this in there too, because I think it was me. I might have talked to more than one person about the same thing in the past week. I do that a lot. But I think me and Ricky talked about this. Maybe one of my other clients who runs a business, kind of the same thing. Like in that question, like what happens if you don't show up at 8 or whatever? You say, I could get fired. That's not untrue when you're operating your own business. It's just that it's nobody firing you. It's just that your business then fails.
Right.
And you eventually just don't have a business anymore.
Right.
So maybe it happens a little bit slower, but it's not necessarily even, you don't have to put it entirely on yourself. Like I'm holding myself accountable. Like in the immediate term, yes. but really it's your customer base that will hold you accountable, because like if you consistently fail to show up the ways you're supposed to and your business then falters, it's the customers who decide like they're not going to buy from you or not going to work with you anymore, right? So still, that risk of getting fired, like in quotes anyway, it still exists. It's just slightly different.
Right.
I do get though that it's a different feeling, like knowing that somebody else set the standard of like, oh, you're supposed to be here from 8 to 5, whatever it is, right? Versus now you do have more flexibility in that sense. Like you could choose to start your day at 11 if you felt like it.
Right.
Whether that's a good idea or not, who knows?
Yeah.
That might be a little bit more difficult though, is having to make that choice, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, and you probably deal with this from time to time. I certainly do. Is this idea of practicing what you preach, right? So I find when I'm giving advice, whether it's a trainer or my wife or someone else in their career,
don't do that. Don't give advice to your wife. It's a dangerous game.
I think yeah, sometimes the low hanging fruit, the things that people need to do from an outside perspective is so obvious, right? Yeah. But when you're kind of turning the spotlight on yourself, for whatever reason, there's a bias there where it's a little more difficult. But
it's more painful too to admit, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Especially if you know better.
Yeah.
And you're telling other people
exactly.
They should know better.
Exactly. The reality is that business will go on without you. Yeah. There might be some short-term disruption, and it'll be painful for everyone involved for a short period of time. But the reality is once things hit a certain inflection point, they're self-sustaining in a way. And I think that the same kind of holds true for the yard too. Like, really? I think if I got hit by a bus or I got in a car accident on the way here, like, yeah, there would be a short-term disruption, but I think people would pick it up and, kind of figure it out. So I think at a certain point, the community that you build and the whether it's business or anything else, outgrows the individual who started it. And
how does that feel?
In some way, in some ways, there's liberation around that. I think it's I think that helps. In moments where I feel overwhelmed or feel like I have too much on my shoulders. But yeah, it's a kind of a difficult thing to come to grips with sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, at some level, like you said, maybe it is freeing, but it's also, I think, part of the reason why you allow yourself to feel like you have to be there, like you have to, sub in when you do and so on, is because it makes you feel important.
Yeah. And
like people generally, I think men especially, men in business especially, want to feel important and powerful at some level. And I think that that's a good way to balance. It's like, who knows if you're right or wrong, right? But assuming that you're right, that, you could just be removed from the business and it would continue on without you. That's maybe a useful reminder at times when you do feel overwhelmed, or when you do, I don't know if you struggle with this at this point, but a lot of people who I think, like the younger guys I coach who are starting their business, they get kind of big headed about it. And like, we've been there, right? I think at times that can actually be useful, but like there's also times when you need to be humbled. And that's one way to do it, is like to remind yourself how small you are, even in the microcosm of your business.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah. I tell myself that constantly. It's like, at the end of the day, I have 2 gyms. Like, I'm not changing the world here.
Hey, I have 0 gyms.
So I think, it feels like everything to me, but in the grand scheme of things, it's actually nothing, So I think having that humility and taking a step back and, appreciating that is important.
Yeah. There's a thing that some of my clients, if they hear this, they'll recognize it. This thing I call main character syndrome. A lot of people seem to think that they are the main character of the world.
Yeah.
And like in the context of your life, that's probably true. It's kind of inherently true. But to anybody else, it's not.
Yeah.
It's just not. So like, I think it's important to remember that, like, however important you think you are, like whatever, like if you're over analyzing something stupid you said yesterday, like it wasn't that significant to anybody else
Right.
other than you.
Well, mostly because the people you're talking to are wrapped
They have
up in
their own shit. Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I
Exactly.
think about that all the, our reservations at the gym are an hour long, and I seriously doubt that people are thinking about us before or after that hour long session, right? Um, maybe a little bit here or there, but when we get a complaint or something goes wrong, I'm antagonizing over it for hours, if not days.
Yeah.
Whereas the person who made that complaint probably typed in their negative review on Google and moved on, and
Their negative review on
out of sight, out of sight, out of mind,
Yeah.
So I think that's another good reminder.
Guys, I know it feels like I'm cutting this off in a weird place, but I'm trying my best to improve the structure of this show. So, in this episode, what you'll see in the second half with Joe is a breakdown of his fitness and the approach that we've taken to get him to where he's going. In future episodes, some of which I've already recorded and started to produce, what we have is a bit more structure. So, for every guest, we're going to have one episode that breaks down their fitness, basically their goals, what they want to accomplish, what they're currently doing to pursue that, and what I would recommend that they change as their coach for a day, if you will. The second episode with each guest is going to be much more free-flowing, guided by the question, essentially, what is the most valuable thing we could learn from, say, Joe Cicero? Before I jump, last thing, I just wanted to say thank you to all of you guys who are listening, wherever you're listening. It really does mean the world to me. It's been really cool that the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. If you guys enjoy what I'm doing here, please consider following, subscribing, wherever you're currently listening. It does really help me stay motivated to continue making this content.